wherever maybe the first association, connection comes to you with this expression that's been used in so many ways, letting go.
Sure.
Where does that resonate first?
I mean, it's, for me, it's a very deep part of the way that I approach life and work and study and spirit. I think it returns again. It's a reminder that is always coming back whenever I am grasping. It's a kind of a through line of remembering to surrender. And I think what's coming to mind first in terms of really my life experience when I really began to engage with this concept, if you will, or idea, this practice, was through a type of dance that I trained in for a long time, Butoh, which is a dance form that comes out of post-World War II Japan. And what I found through that training and performance and continued investigation was a way to access what is authentic and organic and emerging without knowing what that's going to be ahead of time, without making any decisions about what that's going to look like or feel like. And in that allowing, a sort of unraveling of the constrictions around expression, right? And an ability for one to step into an authentic expression of, at that point, it was movement and dance. And it has, affected my life in a lot of ways. Right now, I'm working with it a lot around music and singing. And because I think there's an essence energetically in each one of us, in each thing, in each situation, in each moment that wants to emerge. And I feel like the thinking mind often can get in the way. Not that it can't be part of letting go, but it's almost like something that I've had to train myself in, because I think that culturally I was more brought up to try to control the outcomes, or to try to control or design the expression or the interaction, as opposed to releasing and letting go into what authentically arises, without worrying about, oh, this might not be right, or this is wrong, or this will be judged, or this will be thought of this way. None of that matters, actually.
And do you remember in this early training of Butoh, what helped you connect to that space, that possibility in the training itself?
Yeah. Well, what helped and what continues to help is, I think, noticing when we are going to a planned or habitual place and stopping right there and getting really still and listening to the body, listening to the space around, allowing for less to happen, but really a lot might be happening. But it seems like less because it's different than what the impulse was to do. Yeah. So having a teacher come over, or when I'm teaching, coming over, when you see someone automatically go into whatever they do, and maybe it's even just walking, right? We do a lot of walking where everyone's walking, and just giving the instruction to, well, what if this, what if this restriction was placed there so that you have to start to open to something different? Or what about stillness? Right? What about silence? And movement or sound emerging from a deeper presence, a deeper listening. In that, especially in the Butoh training, and I encourage this in singing as well with my students, there's a lot of other noise that has to kind of get out of the way to get to an actual letting go, because for most of us, we're not used to that at all. So the first letting go is usually very big or very loud or very obvious or, goofy or funny. Or with singing, people a lot of times need to be encouraged to go for it. Just clear the room. With dance, movers tend to want to get, big and expressive. So, however, the same sort of arc of a lot, and then there's a point where, well, I've done all that. What else is left? Now what? And then the letting go can start because, right, the bag is empty a little bit. And then what? So that's, I think, how
And of course, usually something more subtle can arise, right?
It can. It can be subtle. It can be strong even. Depends.
Yeah.
Depends on the person and the expression. Yeah, because you can think of someone who's very closed off or shut down in their, desire or comfort with expressing, either vocally or movement, having the opposite, right? Having the opposite of like, wow, all of this has been underground for so long, and now there's space and there's permission and there's a witness. Yeah. It's interesting because that's a key, I think, to letting go. Letting go alone is one thing, but I've found that a witness is really helpful to facilitate a letting go in some sense. It needs to be a place where the person feels comfortable, but not necessarily a familiar witness, but a witness affects the process, I think, a little bit.
Can you say more about, the witness in the letting go itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we have an inner witness that we get in touch with through that process. Initially, we're maybe not aware of that inner witness. And I think it's like a conversation, someone is holding space. And so perhaps this person is standing in stillness, or I am, or in silence and listening, and there's a container because there's a witness. So a lot can go on inside of us in terms of letting go. I guess this maybe is specifically about what expression is then put into the world. I think the witness helps with that bit.
It's funny because you started mentioning the need to almost to clear obstacles to the letting go first, by developing awareness of those moments where we grasp. You start almost by going to the opposite, right? And I wonder, listening to you, if in a sense the experience of having a witness physically here, present, right? In a non-judging way, is freeing ourselves from this inner witness that we have, or this inner judge, that's inside usually, and that with which we have, this complex relationship, and often a limiting one, right? And to have an experience, oh yeah, that person can be outside now, and it's not judging me, and that opens a possibility of a different kind of experience.
Sure. I think there's a distinction inside with a witness, who is our own non-judgmental witness, and with a self-critic.
Yeah.
Right? So that
Exactly.
self-critic definitely is something that we all struggle with. And I think once the self-critic is a little bit pushed to the edge of the room, or told to just, okay, I see you, and that's fine. I'm not going to have you taking over the experience. Sit back. The other non-judgmental witness within us can start to emerge, and that's a real self-love space of acceptance, which is, it's a life practice, getting in touch with that witness. Yeah, initially with someone holding space, like I said before, there's going to be like, it's like an exercise where you speak to another person, and the other person who's listening doesn't say anything. They're just going to be present. And eventually the talking one will run out of things to say, because there's that initial impulse to fill the sound space. And when they run out of things to say, and the witness is still sitting there, and still sitting there, and still sitting there, then what happens? This is what's interesting to me. This is where, for me, the letting go starts to live in that space. Automatically, almost.
So it's really interesting, the role of time in the process of letting go, huh? The relationship with time,
I think so. That's a really good point. Duration is, and especially as we evolve to be with shorter and shorter and shorter attention spans, that's, I think, always present. That duration is important, but even more so now, to have, whether we're giving ourselves that space and time, or whether a witness is, it's, I'm in a meditation path right now, a silent meditation path that is really all about this effortlessness. I mean, I think letting go is effortlessness. And how do we release into what is, and know that is all there really is. The letting go is a way that we talk about it, but actually the other side is really all there is. Yeah.
So in your path, Butoh was a first discovery, or at least in-depth practice of exploration of that possibility, that space, and allowing that movement to come from from where, actually? From the unknown, huh?
Yeah. And it's not to say that it has to always, you can still choreograph something. You can still write a song. You can still have a project. There can be something that is informing the form. Yet in that process, how do we stay connected to the deep, authentic emerging, right? So this is that balance of effortlessness within some sort of form. I mean, we are embodied. We are this, divine spirit that is all everywhere, pervasive, if one believes in that, embodied. So there is a form and there's a formlessness, and we are we're right dancing with that on the mental plane, on the emotional, on the physical, in order to I think when art and music and dance are, when they really touch me personally, it's because I feel this thrust of freedom in how it came through. It's less perfectly planned, and that's just a personal reflection. There's amazing things that are perfectly planned, and yet the letting go for me is a fundamental part of the Muse really speaking through my expression in my life.
Yes, I can meet you there. I was listening recently to recordings by my daughter, and she was asking me, so which one do you prefer of these two versions? She was not happy with the first one, so she made a different one in a different studio, and it's exactly they're not so different really, but one is just slightly more alive than the other, and it has this imperfections that are so great in a way. And so yes, what you're describing is this kind of, I had this image of braiding those two threads of one of a kind of a form, an intention, I don't know what that is, and the other one of a the possibility of now, like a
Yeah. Well, because without the relationship, it's just chaos. So that's not as interesting. So there's something to be said about practice and spending the time in that space, or giving a nod to whatever the form that you're choosing to experiment with, or study or play with, and then in that finding how you let go. That to me is real mastery of the form somehow.
And yet I have this image of maybe remembering some of my own experiments, but of moments where that to go through the chaos is also maybe an important step in the healing and in the process, right? To free what is there to be freed. Yeah, can you speak to that? Or if it...
Yeah, we have to, clear the room of all the other things that are piled up there. I mean, if you're going to a space to play, a movement space like you were talking about, how many times alone in that room moving till you run out of things to do with your body, and you start to do something new that you've never done or explored. It's like we almost need to go through the chaos, because it's to get to the now. There's all this other thought patterns and stories and experience, and there's everything that's kind of been backlogged, and or trauma, right? A lot of times what comes out as chaos is coming from trauma, that where the witness comes in very vitally to hold space so that some of that can be clear, so that in music and dance and in these ways we can start to transform that energy through letting go. That's, everybody has a different process, but there's a very strong charge with something like that to not let go, because it's scary and painful, and so there's the chaos is it's part of it, and a good part, right? And necessary. It can look like a lot of different things, though. I don't think it looks like the same thing to everyone. And then I think without I guess letting go is so broad. You could have letting go with everybody in chaos, and that could be letting go too. I guess what I'm interested in is when there is a form and we've let go enough that we get to this place where it's like, oh, I thought letting go was easy, but this is actually different. This is actually a new place that I haven't been before, where I don't know what's going to emerge. Then for me, this is a letting go that's like on a fundamental level affecting my consciousness.
Let me know about the various settings in which you experience it.
Now I'm spending a lot of time playing music, and being able to have a form structure of a song and playing with musicians who know that song really well and we've played together, and being able to completely go into the mantra and feel that I'm allowing spirit to move through me, and I'm really not thinking anymore about where I'm going to sing that line. I'm going to start to vocalize and be in that freedom space. And so that's probably right now in my life where I'm experiencing it the most.
And what does it take, and how do you prepare for that?
Well, it comes back to the form. You do the nuts and bolts. You do the practice of making sure that, personally, right, my voice could go to any place and it could be super wild and crazy and maybe not prepared, and that's one way. For me personally, I like to do the practices that allow for when the letting go wants to happen, things are kind of ready to support that, right? So that's just daily vocal practices. And I studied a lot of Indian classical music, which in that tradition, it's about copying your teacher as precisely as you can. So there's a precision there, right? Yet the practice says that through this copying as precisely as possible of your teacher, your authentic voice emerges, right? So we get out of the way of thinking about how our voice is going to sound by just focusing, it's yoga, on the form as it is being presented, right? Just as if we're in a yoga pose and we're going to just focus on exactly where does my knee go? Where's my gaze? So that stillness, that focus allows for, oh, there's this organic, right, voice expression, movement, inspiration that wasn't didn't have space to emerge. So yeah, I like to be prepared to let go. If that makes sense in any way.
Yeah, that's kind of the paradox, right?
Right?
Of mastery in a way, huh?
Yeah, like practicing is it's its own container, just coming back without expectation to practice, and the practice will show me what needs to happen that day, that moment, and I release into that. Don't think about it too much, just do it. And then the payoff is that there's times when there's freedom to soar and to move and to be held in that opportunity of letting go.
Yeah, this is one thing I had in mind before, but it's coming back here. Is that I'm curious to know what place letting go occupied, or what did you meet in terms of letting go when you studied with your master Pandit Pranat?
Yeah, well, I never met Pandit Pranat in the body. He passed maybe like a year or 2 years right before I met his first senior student that I studied with. So I've studied with a number of his senior students. The one who gave me my name is said to have been his first student, Karuna Mai, who was based in Delhi, and he was a musician that would come around the house that she finally was able to study with as a woman, and became a lifelong musician, had the opportunity to go live at the ashram and devote her life to music, which is only a few women get to do that in her culture, yeah, what an amazing musician, both of them. Raga is that perfect paradox, because the letting go in that form is still very elusive to me in this life, because it's such a deep practice. And I started when I was maybe 29. I think I'm 53 now, so it's not much for that practice in terms of fully knowing the form in order to be free in your vocal expression and let go, unless I had a different lifestyle and I was at 29 starting 10 hours a day. And so that said, it keeps me in pursuit is the wrong word, because there's too much eagerness there. It keeps me it's attractive. It's so attractive to almost touch that space. And when I sit with my teachers, my teacher now is in Boston, Warren Sanders is his name. You're always touching on the thread of the magic carpet that they're writing on, and they're holding onto the thread that their teacher is writing on. And the music is so full and freeing, and it's always pushing you beyond your capacity, and you're just holding on. But you can do things in the call and response that require letting go, because the shapes are too long and they're too intricate, and you can't hold it here anymore. So the entire lesson is a practice of letting go, trusting that what I heard is going to come through my body when I respond. Because it starts out, 4-note patterns, 5, maybe 6-note patterns, and you're holding it all right here. Like I got it. I heard it. I got it. I can see it. It's in your visual cortex, and you're repeating, and then they start to really sing, and you have to let go, because this can't hold on to it anymore. And at a certain point, the sounds are coming all around you, informing and invoking the raga And you have to let go into that in order to follow. And so that's just divine play for me. It's also really challenging. There are definitely lessons where you're, crying at the end because you're just like, oh, my brain. Not crying in sorrow, but there's always a wall where the brain is like, okay, I'm tired. That was a lot, because we're opening, for me, as someone raised in the United States, I'm opening my auditory memory and recall in ways that are completely in the capacity as a human, but we don't use that here, right? We're not learning 40,000 verse poems and reciting them as people in the subcontinent have and are in some places still. So yeah.
Yeah, you're really talking about dropping this relying on a form of control of okay, say our attentive brain, right? and opening to a different current, a different force, right? And that is kind of bigger.
Feels bigger.
Feels
I don't
bigger.
know. I don't know if it's bigger, but it feels bigger to me. It feels like a communication between the right and left hemisphere of the brain that hasn't been accessed for a while, at least in this organism, in this culture, but that's completely there for all of us, right?
How does that translate in how you teach? Because you've just been describing the way you are being taught, and and so when you are teaching, and what are how do you help another to let go to the extent to which she or he can?
Yeah, well, I definitely ask all my teachers to be present, and just, I ask for every energetic being that has supported that process to be present and work through me. That's partly is I let go of the thought that I'm going to do something here that's going to help that person to, like, I can hold space, but ultimately that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to hold space and listen really closely. What arises, what could be a suggestion, right? It's another letting go on my part, because I'm not going to teach. I mean, this person is going to find their way to their authentic voice. So I'll lean into the practices that my teachers showed me, and then for different people, different things emerge, and I'll just kind of follow the thread, right? If there's something that's interesting to them, we follow the thread. A lot of it is slowing down and taking the time. Comes back to duration. Specifically with singing, a lot of it is, opening the mouth, not being afraid to get louder, making goofy sounds to kind of clear out the chaos, or to start to be familiar with what that feels like. Giving space and freedom for that exploration so that we can start to get to that place beyond. And then, yeah, practicing listening. Yeah, it's a lot of just, I use with music a drone, right, which is from my Indian classical training, and there's a lot that happens just from that alone. That when people have a continuous sound that they can be accompanied by and sing into, and things start to emerge because there's a sense of not being alone. There's a connection to the whole harmonic sequence. So maybe in a sense, the drone is also a witness, holding space sonically.
Yeah, and this kind of, and this support, and this kind of current of support, you know, of that what exists beyond us, right? It's
yeah, which is part of the all that we are a part of, right? Remembering that we're not separate. Yeah, I'm always excited to work with a new person who comes to learn, and I really ask that my spirit and my guides be present, and I get really clear and listen. It's humbling, and I'm super honored always. So it's just beautiful what each of us has to share when we get really quiet and allow for that.
Yeah, and there, one thing you mentioned is the role of listening.
Music is almost 90% listening and 10% doing. If you're really allowing, if you're really going into it, and we don't usually learn it that way, or we don't learn listening, but then to learn through my Indian classical practice, which is call and response from the beginning. This learning to listen starts to be reawakened. I mean, because we do learn that way as children and as babies, and even inside the womb. And then we get very, visually drawn and dominant, I think, in most Western cultures. But it's not to say that that ability isn't still there.
So I'm curious to hear if what do you notice, or how this practice is informed letting go in your life, as not just as a performer, but in other areas of your life, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it affects everything. It's a daily practice, and I mean, not trying to do too much. Like you described your day, allowing for when space is open to not be compelled to fill them in my day or in my schedule or in sitting with someone in conversation, even letting go to allow for something organic to emerge. I think different people are better at this than some. For me, this is a practice because I notice that I have a tendency to feel that, there's these busy lives and we need to do these things and there's only so much time. And so it's a meditation that around enough. That's been a beautiful meditation lately.
Which one?
Enough. This is
Enough.
enough.
This is enough.
Right? Just right now is enough. And as this is unfolding, whatever pace it takes is enough. And, et cetera, et cetera. That's a good one for me that allows for me to let go into, oh, yeah. And right now, lying down is enough. Right now, the breeze, this is enough. Yeah. At one point, it was shortly before I moved to New York City and was introduced to Indian classical music. I was living and working in Los Angeles, and I moved to a friend's land in Northern California for maybe 6 months to spend some time in nature and just be in a different vibration that I hadn't really experienced. And I remember encouraging myself to spend days watching the spiders in the garden, right? Which at that point in my life, I hadn't had. As a child, sure, I had experiences like that, but at this point I was in my 20s and was working in entertainment in Los Angeles and, like, you know, lots of things. And that letting go into, wow, yeah, the spiders are interesting and this is enough. Watching these creatures, however long, we don't have to keep track. And so, you know, I think allowing ourselves those moments and that conversation to always be present in our days.
I think this is enough, right? I think we've touched on a lot of things.
Enough. Yeah, definitely.